Okay, let's hop right into it, and just to let you know, I have a crazy flu, so I'm going to try to rough it through this. It's not going to be as polished as normal. There's no script, it's just me kind of going off the cuff. But I recently got the Nikon Z6III literally yesterday, so I've been playing with it for about 24 hours trying to run it through its paces, and immediately within getting it, I noticed some pretty big problems with the image. Now, I will admit that I didn't do a ton of like deep in-depth research before I purchased this camera, but I did watch as many videos as I could on it, and I guess maybe I overlooked or didn't notice people talking about the color shifting that happens in the shadows, but I didn't realize how big of an issue it is. I'll put a clip right now. Right when I got the camera, I just took it out of the box. I was talking to my friend on the phone and hit record. And when I watched it back on my computer, the amount of color shifting happening was absolutely crazy. And so I decided to do some testing here because I saw people online say it only happens if you shoot in RAW in high ISOs. And that didn't make sense to me because when you're shooting in RAW, there isn't high ISOs. It's just recording the raw data off the sensor. Sure, you can push the shadows, you can set it to a higher ISO in DaVinci Resolve, but that would mean it's fundamental to the sensor. It's happening even at the lowest ISO because you're not actually changing anything. Like you're recording the raw data, if that makes sense. So I decided to do some testing. I recorded this scene right here with a gray card. So, you know, I've set up this scene to already have the contrast ratios that I like. That works very easily with my FX3 and it works very easily with my Lumix S5 IIX. I went to Nikon specifications, set middle gray to where middle gray should be, so it is a properly exposed image. Because from what I heard a lot of people, they were saying what's when you massively underexpose the image, but that's not what I found. I found that that same color shift is happening even at the base ISO of 800. Doing it exactly the way that Nikon says that you should expose an image. And I tried it in NRAW, I tried it in ProRes RAW, I tried it in H.265, and I tried it in ProRes RAW 4K just to see if any of these settings would change it. And I will say that when you change it to actual SDR, so you're not filming in log, but you're filming in SDR, it's essentially unnoticeable, but I don't know who's buying a camera at this range to use it that has RAW built into it and isn't at very least shooting log. Like that doesn't really make sense to me. If you're buying a camera that can shoot RAW internally, you're probably going to be using it for a little bit more professional stuff, but because you're buying a hybrid, you probably also want to be able to kind of run and gun with it and do it in different ways. For example, with my Lumix S5 IIX, I can take this anywhere. I can treat it like a vlog camera or a professional camera, and I'm going to have no issues either way. Same exact thing with my Sony FX3. Now this one maybe even a little bit more so just because the low light, like I can, you know, take it into kind of crazier situations. But with this Nikon Z6III, I can't trust it. I don't ever know if when I get it into the computer, if it's going to have that color shifting, which can be super apparent. If you crush the blacks all the way down to 0, for example, then yeah, it gets hidden pretty well, but then anything that's in that 10 range or so is going to start to have that pulsing because it's actually like native into the sensor the entire way. That doesn't mean you can't get clean images out of it. It doesn't mean it's not a good camera. On paper, I got it thinking it might actually get me to 100% switch over to Nikon because I've never considered them a real contender. I've done mainly video. I'm a photographer kind of as like secondary. And so I never really thought much about Nikon, but seeing what they've been doing with these, seeing some other reviews on it and getting it and seeing the colors, like it is an amazing camera for colors, but I don't need a camera that I can just use in a studio like this where I can dial in every single bit of lighting. And even then I'm going to be pixel peeping and checking all my shadows to see if I'm getting this weird color shift because I just can't trust it in that regard. So if you guys have any information about how to fix it or what to do, let me know for sure. I also noticed a ton of moire. So again, I brought the camera down here, hit record, and I was just like leaning back in my chair and I saw a bunch of moire show up on my shirt. So then I Googled it and saw that it doesn't have an OLP filter on the camera, which I thought was super interesting. So between the moire issues, the color shifting, it's a little bit weird. Like I want to like the camera so much. The ergonomics of it are amazing. The type of SD cards that it uses is amazing. The fact that it's not overheating when I'm doing NRAW 6K for long takes is amazing, but when I can't trust it, like we always have this conversation, right? A camera can't be a professional camera if it overheats. It can't be a professional camera if it doesn't have dual SD card slots or whatever. I don't think it can be a professional camera if you can't trust the image and colors that you're going to get out of it are going to be stable, are going to be consistent with the other images and colors that you've gotten out of it before, especially when it's changing, not in just color, but in luminance values from 1 second to the next in a pretty wild way. You can't do stylistic stylistic choices like lifting the shadows for whatever reason. Like you couldn't have that kind of like faded look. It will cause that issue no matter what. And if you have a lot of stuff kind of getting faded across your image, you're going to see massive pulses in the image that I just don't think is okay. And so I've seen a lot of people now that I've, found this issue. I've tried to watch as many videos as I could today, and I saw a lot of people kind of like downplaying it. And I get it. Listen, I hear this a lot from people. If YouTubers get cameras sent out to them and people are like, oh, they're just a shill, they're just ignoring all the blah, blah. I noticed it the other way as well, where people who spend their hard money on a camera like this are biased to want to love it and biased to want to downplay the negatives of it, right? It makes 100% sense. The amount of times I've done that on Sony is ridiculous. But we can't like do that if we're trying to be impartial and have these camera reviews. I think we have to look at the situation at hand and realize like this is a big issue. Hopefully Nikon can fix it with a firmware issue. I've never seen it before in any of my cameras. I have the ZVE1, the A7R III, the Lumix S9, the FX30. I have two FX3s. I've had a Ursa Mini 4.6K. I've had a Pocket 6K, a Lumix S5 2X, a Lumix S5 II. I've never seen this issue across any of the cameras, and I think it needs to be fixed, and I think it needs to be addressed by Nikon. That's the scariest thing to me. I couldn't find anywhere where Nikon addressed it, said that they were working on it, said that it was a problem at all. So I'm sitting here now wondering if I should send the camera back, if I should keep it just for testing for here on YouTube to compare it between different camera types, or if I should keep it just to give it some time and see if Nikon will come out with a firmware update that will potentially fix it. But I can't in good conscience take it into a professional shoot or even just like walk around and vlog around my house or like with my kids or my wife or anything with it, because I never know if I'm going to have these wild color shifts across it. And unless I can set up the lights perfectly, if I can set up the lights perfectly, I'm probably going to be using one of my other cameras that has better dynamic range, and I can use my Ninja to record RAW, or I can use my Blackmagic Assist to record B-RAW with one of my other cameras. Like already setting up a setup like that, it would make more sense to use a camera more adapted to that situation, not a hybrid that's supposed to be able to be used everywhere. Now, I hope that this doesn't come across like I'm just overly trashing on Nikon. I love this camera. I love the feel of this camera. The colors on this camera are my favorite I think I've ever tried in a camera ever, by far. Like for my skin tones, when I slapped on the red LUT from Nikon on this, amazing skin tones. The features on this are crazy and show you what we're going to be able to have to look forward to in cameras here in the future. But this problem needs to be fixed, or else I cannot recommend this camera to anybody. So I know this was pretty rough. It was just me talking while I'm sick with a bunch of like rambling because, I can barely think straight because I have a massive headache. But I appreciate everyone for watching. Thank you so much. Take it easy.